Look out at this tiny speck of green and white, a solitary island adrift in the vast, endless blue of the Pacific Ocean. This is Nauru. At just 21 square kilometers, it holds the title of the smallest island nation on Earth. But once it held a very different title. Once it was the richest. It's hard to imagine now, but in the 1970s the name Nauru was synonymous with unimaginable wealth. This small island boasted one of the highest GDPs per capita in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. The average citizen here was wealthier than those in the United States, the United Kingdom, or Japan. Prosperity wasn't just a dream. It was the everyday reality. The people lived lives of comfort, the government's reserves were overflowing, and the world looked on in sheer awe and perhaps a little bit of envy. Historical footage from that era tells a story of a nation on a meteoric rise. We see ships, heavy in the water, departing the island's shores, their hulls filled with the precious mineral destined for far-off lands. On the island itself, luxury cars cruise down newly paved roads, a stark contrast to the quiet, traditional life that had existed for centuries. Modern buildings, symbols of a new age, rose from the tropical landscape, a testament to the nation's newfound fortune. But where did all this wealth come from? It wasn't oil or gold or diamonds. It came from something far more humble, yet just as valuable. It came from phosphate, a mineral formed over countless millennia from the accumulated droppings of seabirds, a natural treasure trove lying just beneath the soil. This white gold, when processed, became a high-grade fertilizer that helped to feed the world, fueling the agricultural booms of distant continents. Nauru was, quite literally, built on bird droppings, and, for a time, it seemed like a miracle. The phosphate made Nauru rich. It provided a standard of living that few nations could match. But this miracle came with a dark and devastating price. The very source of its prosperity was also the instrument of its destruction. Mining is an inherently brutal process. We see the machines, like giant metal beasts, tearing through the pristine island landscape. They ripped up the earth, stripping away the topsoil and the ancient forests, leaving behind a scarred, alien terrain of jagged white limestone pinnacles and barren, lifeless soil. Phosphate made Nauru rich, but it also systematically destroyed the island, and with it, its future. Satellite imagery from space tells the story most starkly. You can watch the transformation over the years. The lush, green heart of the island gradually disappears, eaten away from the inside out. The vibrant coastline remains, a thin, fragile ring of green, but the interior becomes a ghostly white wasteland. With only 21 square kilometers of land, there was never any room for error. Every square meter was precious. And yet, the island's leaders, along with the foreign powers that had long held influence, treated this finite resource as if it were endless. They mined with a reckless abandon that seemed to ignore the inevitable consequences. To understand the tragedy of Nauru, you have to look back at its history. For decades, before independence, colonial powers, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand, controlled the lucrative mining industry. They were the ones who established the operations, and they were the ones who reaped the vast majority of the profits. The phosphate was extracted for pennies on the dollar, enriching foreign companies and governments, while leaving Nauru with deep environmental scars and precious few long-term benefits for its own people. It was a classic colonial arrangement, one that prioritized extraction over sustainability, profit over people. By the time Nauru finally gained its independence in 1968 and took full control of its own resources, a sense of euphoria and national pride swept the island. The Nauru Phosphate Corporation was established, and for a short, glorious period, the profits flowed directly into the nation's coffers. But the clock was already ticking. The damage had been done. The most accessible, highest-grade phosphate had already been taken. It was, in many ways, already too late. The phosphate reserves were rapidly running out, and with them, so was the nation's fleeting, fabulous wealth. The transition was brutal. The once bustling mining operations fell silent. The colossal machinery that had once reshaped the island now stands motionless, monuments of rust and decay against the stark white landscape. Buildings that were once symbols of progress and prosperity, gleaming government offices, modern apartments, cultural centers, are now abandoned, their windows shattered, their walls crumbling. The silence in these places is deafening, filled only with the sound of the wind whistling through empty corridors. It's a ghost of a golden age, a haunting reminder of what was lost. With the phosphate money gone, the government, which had funded nearly every aspect of life on the island, from healthcare and education to jobs and utilities, was suddenly bankrupt. The trust funds that had been set up to secure the nation's future, once worth over $1 billion, had been squandered through a combination of mismanagement, corruption, and disastrous overseas investments. A luxury hotel in Melbourne, a fleet of aircraft for Air Nauru, a failed West End musical in London. The stories are legendary and tragic. The money vanished, leaving nothing but debt and disillusionment. Life for the people of Nauru changed dramatically. The era of free-flowing cash and imported luxury goods was over. The welfare state collapsed. Unemployment soared to staggering levels, at times reaching over 90%. With 80% of the island's land rendered unusable by mining, opportunities for agriculture were almost non-existent. The nation became heavily reliant on imported food, leading to a public health crisis. Rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity skyrocketed, becoming among the highest in the world. A direct legacy of a forced transition from a traditional diet to one based on processed, imported goods. Desperate for income, Nauru turned to a series of controversial and risky schemes. In the 1990s, it became a tax haven and was implicated in money laundering operations for international criminal organizations. Then, in the early 2000s, came the most infamous chapter in its recent history. In a deal with Australia, Nauru agreed to host an offshore detention center for asylum seekers. For over a decade, the island became a processing facility, a place of limbo for thousands of desperate people seeking refuge. This Pacific solution brought in much-needed revenue, but it also brought international condemnation and cast a long, dark shadow over the nation's reputation, turning a struggling country into a de facto jailer. Today, Nauru exists in a state of profound uncertainty. The detention centers are largely empty, and the income from that arrangement has dwindled. The island remains almost entirely dependent on foreign aid, primarily from Australia. The environmental devastation is a constant, visible reminder of the past. The interior of the island is a wasteland, a topside, as the locals call it, that is inhospitable to life. Efforts to rehabilitate the land have been slow and incredibly costly, with estimates running into the hundreds of millions of dollars, money that Nauru simply does not have. And yet, amidst the rust and the ruin, there is resilience. The Nauruan people who have inhabited this island for 3,000 years endure. They are a community bound by strong cultural ties and a deep connection to their home, however damaged it may be. You see it in the fishermen casting their lines from the shore, in the laughter of children playing along the island's single-ring road, in the community gatherings that keep traditions alive. There is a quiet strength here, a determination to forge a future against overwhelming odds. The story of Nauru is more than just the story of a small island. It's a parable for our time. It's a stark and cautionary tale about the dangers of resource dependency, the short-sightedness of valuing immediate profit over long-term sustainability, and the devastating legacy of colonialism. It shows us what can happen when we treat our planet as a commodity to be exploited, rather than a home to be cared for. The moonscape heart of Nauru is a warning, written on the face of the earth itself. It asks us a question we all must answer. What is the true cost of wealth, and what will we leave behind when the resources run out? The fate of this tiny island in the Pacific is a reflection of the choices we all face on a much larger scale. When the phosphate ran out, so did the money. In a single decade, Nauru's GDP collapsed by nearly 90%, the steepest fall any nation had ever seen. The country's bankrupted investments and failed ventures, from luxury hotels to offshore banks, couldn't replace the lost industry. The government offices closed, the airplanes were grounded, and the once bustling harbors fell silent. The dream had turned into a nightmare. What was left behind was a landscape scarred by greed. 80% of Nauru's land was stripped bare by relentless mining. The once lush island, a tropical paradise, became a jagged, barren desert of rock, a moonscape here on Earth. The very ground that had made them rich was now rendered almost entirely uninhabitable, a cruel irony that defined their new reality. Without agriculture, tourism, or manufacturing, Nauru became completely dependent on foreign aid. A tragic and shocking reversal. They went from one of the world's richest nations to one of its poorest, a cautionary tale that echoed in global news headlines. Their story became a symbol of catastrophic economic mismanagement. Today, Nauru's story is more than just an economic tragedy. It's a powerful warning. It serves as a stark reminder of how dependence on a single resource, no matter how valuable, can destroy even the wealthiest nation. As we see children playing near the ocean and families fishing along the coast, there's a quiet resilience, a life that continues amidst the ruins of a forgotten fortune. The rise and fall of Nauru isn't just about phosphate. It is about what happens when a nation runs out of both its resources and its foresight. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into our world's most compelling stories. We'll see you in the next one.